So there's a little delay, they told me, because of some technical issues, but should start in a couple of minutes.
You okay?
We are expecting someone.
Are we?
No, I just asking.
No. We're just waiting for you.
Really? I just want to give them time.
Your mic is on.
Yeah, it's on. Hello. Sorry. Good morning, everybody. Have a nice afternoon. So it's always a very surprising and scary and interesting and
and many other brilliant words we can describe how we await the last masterclass in this festival. So today we have a privilege to welcome one of the most distinctive visual storyteller working in a film today. With the background, the bride's design, production, and creative direction, he has built a career of transforming narrative ideas into rich visual words. He will describe his dedicated collaboration with Christopher Nolan, and he dive us into the visual storytelling, how he can give the rhythm, how he can give the frame of the story even before any of the characters can start to speak. So please welcome and have a very big applause to the 2025 President of the Jury, Mr. Eggert Ketilsson.
Thank you very much. So, so as you can see, I have the glacier on the screen, which used to be the biggest challenge always in the filmmaking in Iceland and for different films. But then working on Dunkirk, I had worked with Christopher Nolan on Batman Begins and Interstellar before on the glacier as well. And after that experience, they called me and asked me to come to Dunkirk and to England and Holland as well to take the responsibilities as a supervising art director on the film. So I'm not the designer, that's Mr. Nathan Crowley, but I was the supervising art director and his right hand, both in a creative process, organizing and executing the job. I thought the glacier was a challenge, but I soon found out that, well, I thought, oh, going to the beach on Dunkirk to do a film, that's great, you know, it's gonna be sunny, summer, spring, you know, it's gonna be fantastic, but it turned differently. It was quite a challenge and much more challenge than I ever faced up on the glacier or in nature in Iceland. If I introduce myself a little bit better, you know, then I started quite late in the industry. I started about 28, 29 years old. I had some theater experience before and was involved in the set design for the theater and performing as well. And then I got a job as a property master at the State TV in Iceland and worked there for a few years, for 4 years, and then got the opportunity to go freelance in the tiny little Icelandic film business. And from there, the ball started rolling, and here I am. You know, I'm not gonna start talking about, you know, previous jobs and all that, you know, but I'm gonna go straight into what I call the dynamics and challenges in set design and art direction. You know, is all the aspects that people or I had to take in to execute a job or jobs of that scale. So it's because I'm also used to working on a much smaller scale on little Icelandic films in the past, you know, where we were maybe 10 guys in the art department, and also in different parts of the world where I've designed films, you know, only with maybe 20, 30 people in the art department, etc., on low-budget films, and then stepping up to this world, which is quite different. So I'd like also to say in my introduction that since I was working in a little industry in Iceland, I had to wear many hats. So I had to, you know, when you're working on a film as a property master, for example, in Iceland in the past, you would take care of the special effects as well. So I created a special effects company that's still working, and I sometimes work as a special effects supervisor as well. So I've designed films, I've done the art direction, I've been the prop master, and I do quite a lot of special effects as well. So I'm going to be talking about, if we have the time, I want to go into Interstellar, which was the film that I did with them. Well, a big chunk of that film that I did with them in Iceland before being offered the Dunkirk job. But we start with Dunkirk. Yeah, Dunkirk, as you know, or maybe most of you have seen the film, is about the evacuation across the channel and the French resistance at the same time. And I'm going to play the trailer, and then we start talking about the film. Oops.
What has happened is a colossal military disaster. We shall go on to the end. We shall never surrender.
The call went out. We have to go to Dunkirk. Ready on the stern line.
What are you doing? You know where we're going.
Into war, George.
I'll be useful, sir.
What about? He's on me.
I'm on him.
She's about to leave.
They need to send more ships. Every hour the enemy pushes closer. They've activated the civilian boats.
Civilians. We need destroyers.
Where are we going?
Dunkirk.
I'm not going back.
We know they will die.
You're a weekend sailors, not a bloody navy.
You should be at home.
There's no hiding from this, son. We have a job to do.
Turn it around!
We shall fight on the beaches. We shall fight on the landing grounds. We shall never surrender. We shall never surrender. We shall never surrender.
Wait a bloody airport!
Okay. So yeah, this is the trailer, and when we started preparing in France, we actually started preparing in Iceland because one of the main tasks for the film was to build this jetty called the Mole that was like a 250-meter long jetty where ships could moor and was going quite far into the ocean. So I started the drawing process there, and I was lucky enough to get some Icelandic and Romanian, actually, engineers in Iceland to help me with the jetty. And I will show you later on a little video from the construction where they show the enormous task of that construction, which was something that is rarely done in the film industry, a construction of that scale. But we started looking at historical reference material. There's a lot of historical reference material from Dunkirk, both before the destruction of the city and after. Some horrific material. I'm not going to be showing a lot of that here. You know, I'll show what is relevant to the film, but we saw that there, you know, because we were doing a film that was kind of before the actual destruction happened, so we were not bringing in a lot of rubble and destroyed machinery or weapons, you know, and there was a very early decision not to make a historical period costume drama, you know. We would avoid that, you know, by all means, you know. So the lines would go minimalistic and to go modern and to as modern as possible, and there were so many things because we took the decision to shoot it in the actual place where the events took place, in the city and on the beaches there. Then, of course, there are so many modern things in the way that we would have to disguise or try different methods to take the focus of those buildings, architecture, etc. And yeah, so this is our site map, you know, and kind of the general. It's a map over the places that we would be mainly working on in the city, and we were in a very good cooperation with the city and the harbor authorities, because there's a huge industrial harbor in Dunkirk, very busy, and we had to use that a lot. We had over 40 ships and boats that we were sailing and pulling out of the port there, you know. And we were also, in the beginning of the film, you know, it's a film about an escape, you know, and it's called The Miracle of Dunkirk. You know, there were over 400,000 soldiers there on the beach, and about 350,000 of them got away, and there was about 60,000 that got captured and killed. It's about the population of my country, you know, Iceland, you know, the amount of people that were there, you know, and we were trying to show that reality with the actual little budget that we had, because Christopher Nolan had promised to the studios to make this film for a much lower budget than we needed to be able to do all the stuff that was required in the script and by him. So yeah, as the film started inside the city on the inner streets of the city, there was a lot to do there. You know, we had about 2 kilometers of streets to disguise or try to and plug up, you know, and try to make them as much in the 1940 period as possible. But the decision was, though, that we would not, if there were like beautiful tiles or something that would work well for the film, even though it was from the 60s or the 70s, we would let it pass, and we would just use the visual opportunity if we had something nice in the frame. And the film is shot on IMAX format, so it's a 70 millimeter film, and it was also shot on 65 millimeter Panavision cameras as well, sometimes because of sound reasons and because of space reasons, but mostly for sound reasons, because we didn't have the IMAX blimp then that we have now. I just come off the Odysseus, where we had this huge blimp for the IMAX camera, you know, that you need 5 guys, strong guys, to carry just the blimp, because the IMAX cameras are just like old sewing machines, they're like this, so the format and everything is visible, every detail, so you don't get away with any lies, so to say, so you have to try to disguise what you can, and then what gets through, you hope that Chris would, we hope that he would do something with the visual effects, but he would push them aside, and there was very little visual effects in this film. I can point it out later where we had some visual effects. But the main areas where we were working in the city, it was in the inner streets where the journey begins. And then we were working on different places on the beach. There's the place which is quite, at another part of the beach, quite far away, is a place where the main protagonist goes to have a dump and uses the enemy's propaganda to clean his bum with, and where he discovers the French boy who dresses up in the English military costume, and they start the journey, escaping the enemy. Then we had a little section on the beach there that, there was a big beach, part of the beach where we had the alignments of the soldiers, because at the time, the soldiers would align in lines, and they, while waiting, and they were constantly doing exercises on the beach and aligning up and spreading out and aligning up and spreading out, also to avoid the German aircraft attacks, Then we were also working a lot. There was a big section of the shoot was on the mole, the jetty that we built. And then we were also working on that industrial beach that is further out there on the right-hand side. So those are some plans and drawings from the end of the journey from the inner streets, and sometimes we were lucky with the architecture, and sometimes we had to change. But we took the decision really to not to change things above the second floor. We would deal with everything up to the second or up to the third floor, but after that we would not deal with it. And it was, of course, in the understanding that the visual effects would take care of stuff above the action line, but it didn't happen, so everything was like it was, but it's probably just me that notices, but no one else. We had there are I think about 50 to 70 drawings from different houses, and so we had to draw everything up, all the plugs, what we were using, and everything that was built for plugging the houses, because there was a lot of PVC windows, PVC doors, and totally modern stuff, that we had to disguise. This is the only period car that we had on the streets. You can see how minimalistic it is, and we had much more sand on the streets there. And at one stage of the design process, someone brought up cobblestone streets, and we took that off the table very quickly, because looking at the reference material, it was all tarmac, more or less, tarmac and earth. And we used the, of course, this is what happens on windy days in Dunkirk. The sand comes into the streets. And it looks like this, so we just imitated that. And this, the sandbag barricade there in the background is the only time we see the French resistance in the film. But the film is really about the sacrifice of the French, because it was them that kept the enemy away while the soldiers were getting over the channel. But as you can see, there's not much that we put in there. We built this thing here on the left-hand side, that cover for the garbage. And it was for action purposes that we did that. This is where he comes back into the streets after he goes into the garden, escaping the bullets. And those cafes that, the street was, as you can see, much wider there, so it was that was a design decision, and a decision by Chris and Nathan, to really narrow the street there, to exaggerate the opening when he comes to the beach, to exaggerate the feeling of openness and vulnerability on the beach when he comes out there and through the flagpoles. And the design of those cafes was typical French cafes, and we had a lot of graphics there, and there was quite a lot of work on the textures for those cafes. And they were fully dressed on the inside, even though you never see the inside. They were fully dressed on the inside. And it was quite often that we used this kind of matte texture for windows, etc., because with the shininess of the windows, they catch the eye, and you start to look at the shininess, and we wanted to avoid that. And we used that also to kind of, to disguise surroundings, so the eye wouldn't be looking too much for the reflections. Sorry. So this is one of the streets there that we had to dress, and we were very lucky that we had in our construction team we had excellent model makers, and the only thing we did there really with those light poles, was we created those sandwiches, the lower parts, and we painted the light poles matte, and we aged them a little bit. And then we had a few military vehicles there, but as we were shooting, like on the first shooting day was on 26th of May, and the production hadn't thought about at all that the beaches get full of tourists there, early May, so I had to call them once, I came to the beach and there were like 200,000 people there on the beach, all tourists, and I shot a photograph and I sent to LA to the production, and they got like seriously shocked by what they saw. But we managed to make a deal with the city, so we kept this part of the beach, and the tourists were on the other side most of the time, and it was a huge location job to control that, But then we had. As you can see later, we had some cutout soldiers, trucks, etc., to hide some structures on the beach that could be seen in the background. But the set dressing was kind of minimal, most of it was there, but we always had the rule of, with the set dressing, that it would be straight lines, no rubble, nothing spread around, nothing thrown around, everything would be in order in a minimalistic way, everything. You can see the benches there. We decided to keep those. Those are absolutely modern benches, you know, but we like them, you know, they look good, you know, so we kept those. One of the main obstacles on the journey on the beach was this huge convention center that we had there. You know, it was an absolutely modern, boxed building, huge, and needed to be fully operational all the time. And so we took a decision to change it into a, so you can see the building there. And it was right in the background for the journey of the protagonist, you know, and we took a decision to change it into a cement factory. And this is the concept, the mock-up concept of the cement factory. And this is how it ended. And we took all the windows and we put matte vinyl on them, you know, to get rid of the reflections, you know, which helped a lot, you know. And then we had those front pieces for it and the conveyor belts, etc., you know. And underneath, you see the dark kind of, because there is a rigging, like scaffolding under all this, you know, that we had to keep there, you know. So instead of building around the scaffolding, we used the Icelandic dense fishing nets, you know. So they disappear. You see the dark shadow there under the conveyor belt. And we used that quite widely for large, shiny surfaces in the background. You know, we would throw a net over it and it would disappear. So this was what we were dealing with a lot there in Dunkirk, was because the scale was so big, you know, and the canvas was so big and the strokes were enormous. So we were always constantly looking for methods. How can we disguise and lead the attention of the audience to the actual story, to the protagonist, you know. So we were using every opportunity we could to try to hide enormous buildings that couldn't be framed out, and using the special effects as well, smoke, for example, that you will see later, just to try to get away with it, like the protagonist who's running away. So we were running as well. This is during the construction of the center. And it was fully operational while we were shooting. Same thing was with the inner streets of the city. Everybody was there at home, you know, they were all photographing us on the streets, you know, so there was no secrecy there like Christopher Nolan usually wants, you know, full secrecy, but there he was exposed to everybody, so there was no escape. So now we are to the mole, you know, that huge construction that we had to do, and we had 8 weeks to build this 250-meter long jetty. We had 8 weeks on the spot, but we had like a 4-week prep, you know, for the construction of it. And it was built on an old foundation, which is shown there. You know, this is the old jetty that they had at the time in 38. And the foundation for it was enormous, you know. So, and we had the foundation. We wouldn't have been able to do it without the foundation. So we built it on the foundation. So these are the drawings that we started with in Iceland. And we also had to dredge the bottom. We had a dredging ship there to dredge so we could moor our ships. We were not allowed to moor the ships to the mole itself, you know, but we had We drove poles down into the sea, like 20 feet, 25 meters down, something like that, to be able to moor the ships that we needed there, And it was especially the hospital ship that plays a big part in the film. And this is the construction of the mole. I will show you later on a little slideshow from the construction, where they describe the scale of it. But it was funny that you can see the scale of it there. You can see the person working there. This one, this is on the low tide, and in the beginning of the prep and in the design process, we were asked, and we were looking for the ticking clocks, because to lift under the emergency in the film, and the urgency. It's a film about escape, It's about some guys running all the time. Actually, when I read the script, I thought, oh, it's not very interesting. It's just some guys running and trying to escape. But of course, there are some really dynamic points in the script, that you can see in the film that lift it up. But one of the ticking clocks for us, was the tide, the tide coming in and going out, and it's physically very difficult there, and was at the time, that the ships couldn't come in because it was too shallow on the low tide. So you always had to wait for the high tide to get some ships in for some guys to get away. There was no way to go out or come in on the low tide. And the low tide goes out. It's the difference of the tide there is like 5 or up to 6.5 meters. So you can't really get in on the low tide, especially on the beaches, because the sea goes out like 300 to 500 meters out, and you have land. So they would come in and beach the boats, as you can see with the blue trawler in the film. They beach the trawler, and that's how they got in, and that's the emergency, waiting for the tide to come in to get out again. So yeah, as I said, we had some horrible weathers in Dunkirk. It's a place for wind sports. It's where people come to enjoy the wind. And we had some horrible moments there. We had to rebuild the jetty or parts of it 2 times during the filming and just before filming as well, because of winds and bad weather. And that was something that was following us. And it seems to, with Chris, quite often, I've been on 5 films with him now, and quite often the wind follows him, and he keeps on filming though the weather is bad, because that's when it's interesting, that's when something happens, as he says, that's so yeah, we had that there as well. So this is the mole still. And in the beginning, we thought about keeping the mole perfectly like brand new and white, It was a decision, it was actually Chris that requested that, but we were quite surprised, and we knew that there would be a time, because he came just before filming and he saw it completely white, but we knew that he would ask us to age it, and this is after we aged it. And so this is looking back at Dunkirk, and you see there's a lot of stuff there in the background, that we didn't want to see, but it was difficult to deal with. But we were allowed to use smoke, a lot of black smoke, and that's what we used in the film. We used a lot of smoke to distract the audience, to take the attention away from the backgrounds. For example, there behind the source of the smoke there's a blue industrial building. It's a museum. It's a arts museum, horrible building, but we managed to disguise it with the smoke. It's not often that you can ask Chris to move the camera if there's something horrible in the background. You know, he usually wants something there. You know, but there was an instance on this film, you know, where he promised to move the camera and said, "Yeah, okay, I'll move the camera." Yeah, then you know it's not going to be in the frame. You know, but then he didn't move the camera, and the horrible building is in the background, but no one notices. You know, because you have you got a good actor in the foreground. You know. Yeah, there you can see it only, even stronger, you know. And this was the only cannon that we had during the shooting, apart from the cannons on the ships, you know. This was the only land cannon we had, and we kept moving it around, you know, for the frame. So one of the techniques that we used there, you know, was cutouts, and we were also working with scale, quite a lot with scale and cutout, and we had 1,000 soldiers like this, cutout soldiers, hand painted, that we kept in the background, and this was a test we did, and we managed to tent them up. So they just stood there, and then you have a couple of people walking around the soldiers, and then they come alive, you know, in the background. And those are the guys that were taking care of the soldiers there, you know, and they would tent them up wherever we needed them in the background, 1,000 of them. And it saved a lot of money for the production, because those are extras. So they saved a lot of extras money, you know, where they had the cutout soldiers. And then you have like 2 or 3 guys in costume walking around, and they really become alive. We tested them, and they worked really well, like on a pretty wide lens, about maybe 50, 70 meters, up to 100 meters away from the lens. They worked perfectly, and no one would notice that they were 2D soldiers, you know, cutout soldiers. They are used there in the background, you know, and this is, you see how the black smoke, this is all our black smoke, and there's no CGI in this. So you can see how it distracts from the background there. And there you see the industrial center, but right behind that is the blue building, you know, the horrible blue building, but somehow, you know, out of focus, and with this distance, we got away with it, you know. There in the distance, you see the cutout soldiers as well. This is all cutout soldiers in the distance there in that frame. It's the same thing, you know, with, you know, we added 1,000 to the, I think we had about 500, 300 to 500 extras on the beach for those scenes. But with the cutout soldiers in the background, you know, and in amongst the people, you know, we could really add to the masses of the humans on the beach. So this is how it was after the evacuation there, you know, lots of stuff on the beach and leftovers, you know, and as we said, we took a decision to be minimalistic, you know. We were telling the story of guys running away, escaping, getting home, and the French getting away. So we decided not to go that way, except in a couple of instances. So this is the beached blue trawler that the scene in the film where the Dutch captain has beached his trawler to try to get some guys on board. And the interior shots for that scene was shot in LA in a tank studio. There was a discussion about this trawler or a boat, I call it a boat, but the Americans called it a trawler. There was a discussion with Chris about whether we should go with a wooden boat or a wooden hull or a steel hull, And there was quite a lot of discussion about that, but then he wanted to go steel, and some guys were surprised about that because we had bullets flying through the hull and some shooting going on, but there was also a reason for that, because this boat that we had was going to take so much beating during the shooting that a wooden hull would have got destroyed on the first days of the filming, and we would have been in trouble. Chris is very practical in that sense. Quite, he's very technically minded and very practical and knows the elements quite well, And we know the elements. We had to go through so many different types of destruction, weathers, and movement of land, etc., and transport. So we found this wreck of a boat in Dunkirk, because we hadn't really planned for the boat. We had other things to think about. But we found this steel wreck of a boat, and that's what we used to build the Blue Trawler. It's really enjoyable sometimes working with Nathan and Chris. Is because they have the main outlines planned, and designed, but then they do leave quite a big chunks for us, the art directors and the set designers, to solve, and we could get the opportunity to use our creativity as well. And so we design and we fill into the gaps, here and there. And also because they are not there until maybe, like Nathan, the designer, he came, in the prep time, he came for 3 days, 2 times to Dunkirk. But otherwise, it was our job, just to get the information, gather the information, and keep it intact, which is very important in our job, is to keep the information uncontaminated and gather all the information and distribute the information to everybody involved. It's kind of number one. So this is after we beached it there, and on the beach we were constantly dealing with the weathers and the tide, and it was quite usual that after each tide, if the sea came in, after each tide we had to fix something, there was a very heavy current there, and the sea would treat us badly, and destroy something, and of course, when you're working with those in this environment, you have to take into notice in your design process that those things, as I said, and Chris thinks about as well, is that those things need to take the beating. The sets need to be able to take the beating, and you have to be ready with spare parts. You have to be ready with spare parts for the sets. If things go wrong, so this is it wasn't that far out, in the sea, so it was okay, and also because it was a steel hull, we were fine, But you can see I think we were sinking it and pulling it up like about 50 times during the shoot. So it really took the beating, you know, and I had one of my Icelandic guys following it out on sea, you know, and he was constantly fixing something on it, you know. Yeah, then there was a late decision in the process to build this truck pier and to have that in the scene, one of the escape scenes. You can see the reference. They used the trucks because of the long beach, you know, of the very long. Yeah, and because of the enormous difference of the tide, you know, they lined up the trucks and they built like a truck pier that they could walk on to be able to get on the boats and escape. And on that same beach, or in the same set, you know, we built this cutout destroyer, you know, which is a destroyer that it's a 2D thing, you know, based on this wreck that is an actual wreck from the Dunkirk beach during the times. And this is a Photoshop, you know. We were kind of checking out the scale because we decided to build it like quarter scale. So it's a 40-meter long wreck. But the ship itself was about 150, 160 meters long. And we were checking how far away we could keep, or how close to the camera we could keep this scaled wreck without getting into trouble. And it kind of worked all the way, you know, down to 20 meters, but we took a decision to keep it 50 meters away. But then, as Kristin looked at this during the shooting until on the day, and I was responsible for setting up the set, you know, and he came to me and he said, well, looks like we have to move the ship 50 meters out, you know, it's too close to the camera. So, and I knew that it was impossible to do it, you know, but in this situation, you don't say no, you know, just what I did, you know, I went behind the set and I waited for a little while, you know, and to see what would happen, you know, and then the designer came running behind the set, you know, he found the angle, we don't have to move the set, you know. So that's what happens, you know. It's also on the glacier once he scouted the glacier for Interstellar quite early when it was cold, you know, and the glacier was very white. And then when he came to shoot, you know, the glacier was all graphic, very gray and black and white, you know, and then he said to me, well, you have to make the glacier white. I said, okay. Yeah, I have this material, I said, you know, I can take a pipe and stick it up in the wind, you know, and pump out this white material, and it will make the glacier white, you know. He said, yes, excellent, you know. Of course, it didn't do nothing, but it's at least, you know, we tried something, you know, and he was very happy with it, you know. So this is the cutout wreck, you know, destroyer wreck on the floor. This is a drone shot. You can see the table from the backdrop painters there. You know, I've been lucky enough to have a couple of backdrop painters with me on every job with Chris. And we use them widely. Both they're happy to do scenic work as well. You know, they are excellent. And this is painted on hardboards, you know, on the floor in a warehouse in Dunkirk. And then we put it on steel frames and put it there in the background. So it's a totally 2D thing, you know, that works quite nicely to enrich the frame, you know, in the background by the truck pier where we had the action. There you can see it on the beach. But we couldn't keep people or the as soon as you get some comparison, you know, then you can't cheat the scale so well, you know. So we had to have the action or the background action in the midground, you know, between the truck pier and the destroyer. So this is the study for the destroyer, you know, and this is what you have to do to kind of, when you're working with a tide like this, you need to go out there and you need to measure and you need to find out where you can place your set, because you have to find the exactly right place for it, because if not, then it might not be visible because the sea is above, and it might be too visible if the sea is too low. So it's quite a cooperation between the assistant directors and us, you know, to find the position. What time of day are we shooting this scene, you know, and where is the tide when we want to shoot it, you know, and where is the sun when we want to shoot it, where is the light, you know, and all that. So there's quite a lot of factors that have to come into place to be able to get the best results. And I think it was, you know, Chris and Nathan were in LA when we were doing those measurements, and we brought one of the trucks. We had to build all the trucks. We had to, we had one Bedford truck, and I think we built about 8 or 10 of those trucks. And we rented the chassis because no one was willing to give us their beautiful period trucks to put into the sea and destroy them, you know. So we built them all, you know, and we had a fantastic modeling team, you know, that cast all these trucks, you know, and we rented the chassis for them. You can see me there, you know, I bought myself some wetsuit, you know, to go into the sea and measure, you know, and find out the right position for those. So this is the truck pier, and we had to anchor the whole thing down, you know, because we had the tide come in like this. You can see the tide there coming in, and there was, every time the tide came in, there was some destruction going on, and we had to mend it. This is, there's actually a funny story there, you know, because working in France, you know, was quite an experience for me, and working with a French crew, and wonderful crew, you know, great crew, most of them from Paris, and none of them had, though, dealt much with the elements, you know, but it was a great crew. We had a construction crew, about 100 people on the film, and in Dunkirk, and in the morning we had to set this up in the morning of the filming. So they were like filming in the afternoon, I think about 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So we had to set this up in the morning, very early morning, and it was on a Monday, and the French crew always kiss 4 times on the Monday morning, you know. And you have to kiss everybody. Everybody has to kiss everybody, you know. And I, you know, this was also in the workshop every morning. You know, everybody kissed. And I said, "Hey guys, we're doing a film. You know, we have to work. You know." And it was a Monday morning, so there was an extra amount of kissing. You know, and I said, "Hey guys, we have to get on with it. You know, it's." And they were not happy with me, you know. They said, in France, we do it the French way, you know. So, but we managed, you know, with the kissing. And there you can see both the sets. And this was approximately the camera position for that scene, or for a section of that scene, or for the main shot. And this is where Chris wanted me to move the set 50 meters back, you know, which was an impossible task, but we waited, and he found a way, you know, so there was no problem. This is on the high tide. You can see that the destruction is going on. Some guys running there. Then it was the hospital ship, that sinks in the film. And quite late in the process, this was a thing that was always on the calendar, and I wanted to speak about that, for the students especially. It's in the beginning when you come to a task like this, that you have to take on such an enormous scale film. It's if you start thinking about everything at the same time, you can get overwhelmed, and you lose your mood. It's too much. And I personally, I wasn't sure if I was going to survive this. When they showed me the scale and what we had to do, we were quite concerned, all of us, that we could deliver this. But making a calendar, and just working from day to day, really, and seeing like the projects that you have, like some weeks ahead of you, or maybe a month, But this film was shot on only 50 days. The whole thing. It was quite a complex filming, though. And so not to get overwhelmed and just take one step at a time, but that leads to another thing, that sometimes there are things in the calendar that people stop thinking about, and suddenly it pops up. And that was the thing with this hospital ship, that no one had thought about, that the ship was going to sink in the story, So what are we going to do about, because we couldn't sink the ship, it was a Norwegian precious period ship, that we got the permission to paint, though. What are we going to do about the sinking ship, And so we came up with building just the section that we would see in the sinking process. This is the reference for the hospital ship. This is the ship. It was totally black when it came to Dunkirk, so we painted it in the harbor. We had some painters just on boats around it, and we painted it there, Oops, sorry, yeah. And then we dressed it, of course, a little bit, but it was quite, a pleasant ship, with quite a pleasant Norwegian crew, that they kept inviting us to coffee and pancakes every day, And they saw how worried we were about the whole thing, and we were using it on the first shooting day as well by the mole. But so these are the plans for the half-scale ship, what we would have to build of it, And then there was the camera position on the jetty, where we built a little foreground for the camera, shooting through the mole, through the jetty, in a different location. It was, if you watch the film thoroughly, you can see that the background is totally different from the background that's where the actual ship is, There's a totally different background where the half-scale ship is and the sinking happens. And we had the half-scale ship in a crane. I'm going to show you this little sequence here.
They need to send more ships. Every hour the enemy pushes closer. They've activated the civilian boats.
So as you could see there, there's the sinking ship is sorry, a moment. it's just this section that we see, and we cut to the right moment, we add a lot of smoke. The only VFX in this scene, is, or the visual effects or the computer graphic image, is some little man jumping off the ship, that he put in, so he comped in, it's a composite shot, where you shoot some man jumping off a handrail into the water, and you comp it into the ship. That's the only visual effects used for this scene. All the people in the foreground and midground are actual stunts, and then it's just the little guys jumping off in the background. And it was funny, we knew about this ship, but it was like, I think about 20 days before the actual scheduled filming of the ship, we started building this, So we built it and dressed it, it had to be dressed in scale, so every detail had to be in the half scale, half the size. Then this, in the film, there's a destroyer, and there's we were lucky enough, to find a destroyer that we could use for the actual filming in Dunkirk. It was a ship we found in Nantes in France. It was a huge destroyer from 1956 that we changed. So we redressed it. And the owners were, because we had looked quite far around Europe and other places, and we couldn't find any ship that, there was no one that would give us permission to use their ship or to rent it. But those guys, we went to meet them in Nantes, they were like French generals and older soldiers, and they agreed on giving us the ship, which we used. I will show it to you later. But from that ship, we built the sinking destroyer, which was shot in the backlot in LA at the Universal Studios in a big water tank there. We call it the Frankenhull because it was a kind of a Frankenstein ship, It was, it's only built for the angles that we shot. It was only built for certain angles, So looking at it like this, it's ridiculous, But then with the right angles, then it was fine, This is also, we had two of those old minesweepers from Holland, or three of them actually. And the design for those ships, the cannons were sometimes way bigger than in reality, So they were mainly built for backgrounds, to see the shapes, so they could be far away in the background, you would still see the shapes, and understand, and they would give the feeling of an actual destroyer or warship in the background, But if you show it to a military person or a Navy person, they start to laugh, And we also had to cover because you can see the planks on the top there, those are just planks, and we had to cover the bridges, the steering houses, of the ships, and they could flip open. They had to put down the covers while we were shooting them, and they couldn't see anything, but they would flip up right after we shot them, So this is, you can see the sinking destroyer there in the background. Is obviously, that's VFX, CGI, but everything else was done there in the ocean. I'm gonna just show this sequence here.
There's no hiding from this, son. We have a job to do.
Turn around!
landing grounds. We shall never surrender. We shall never surrender. We shall never surrender.
Where's the bloody airport?
So the interior for that sinking scene is shot in the studio in LA. Here's a model of the Frankenhull ship. You know, that was, you know, it's damn ugly. You know, but it served its purpose in the tank in LA. You see it there. It was on a revolving axle, so they could move it like this. You know, they couldn't move it around, but they managed to move it like this. They had a lot of problems. The special effects took care of the turning, and there was a lot of problems because of the weight as well. This is the Moonstone, which played a big part in the film. You know, it was one of the main ships and boats. We bought this boat for almost nothing from the Scottish Highlands. And we shot a lot on board. You know, we took the big IMAX camera in there, you know, and we modified the interior so just for the angle, so we could shoot the scenes inside the boat. And we shot a lot, both on sea and, of course, in the harbor, but it didn't go into the studio or anything like that. We shot all the scenes on board. And this is the destroyer that I spoke about that we got. You know, we had to modify this destroyer quite a lot. The SATAC had a lot to do. There was like a tower there. You can see the cut. We cut like, I think about 20 meters of the tower, 15, 20 meters of the tower to lower that. And then you can see the front cannon is real. The next one is plywood, you know. So, and then we put on some lifeboats. You know, we had some poly lifeboats, you know, plastic lifeboats, you know, that we got covered with brown tarps. You know, you can see we used a lot of brown tarps to cover what we could of modern elements on the ship. And under the plywood cannon there's like a 1970s rocket system, you know, some kind of a rocket system. And then on the back there's like a mine-sweeping equipment, you know, and monitoring equipment that we just didn't care about it, you know. It looked okay, you know, it was modern, but it looked okay, you know, and nobody cares, you know. And that was the kind of direction that we took, you know. We're making our own story, we're making our own film, you know, and it's not a period costume drama, it's a story, you know. And there were some people that complained, you know, about the period and all that, but it's always, you know. And I really liked what Ridley Scott said the other day when someone was telling him that Napoleon was not the right period. And then he said, well, asked the person, were you there? You know. So that was a good remark from him. So yeah, this was another thing we built. You know, this was actually my design. It was like this sunken ship that we could pull around the jetty. You know, so to make a little bit of the impression that there was some destruction going on. You know. And then we traveled to Holland, where we shot on the Isemer, which is a man-made ocean in Holland. And there we shot most of the action on the water and in the air, and interactions between the air and the water. And this was a set that we built in France and we took with us to Holland, you know, because we didn't have any workshop or anything in Holland. We just had a little tent there and just a few construction guys. And this one had to go quite far into the water. So this is, oops. Sorry. This is me on top of it in France, you know, and the steel worker down there, I think, you know, that was welding it for me. And then we had to put it in the water. And we were working in a little town called Dunkirk in Holland, you know, where there was not much there, you know, but I managed to find like this barge boat. It was like a crane boat in the harbor there, and they helped us to bring the set out to sea and defended it against the winds, the horrible winds that we had there, you know. And I remember standing with Chris on top of this set, you know, and it was kind of disappearing underneath us, you know, when we decided we had to shoot it, you know. So this is while we're shooting it, you know, we have the actor, the actual actor there on the set. You know, you can see the safety guys there, they're on the back, you know, under the handrails, you know, and one here. This is when we were shooting the set, you know, and you can see when the set came up, and this is the rig, the construction under the set that was, you know, took days to put it down in the ocean and to anchor it down. And this is how the elements treated the set, you know, and we were close to getting this result on the screen, you know, but we just managed to, we had some textile that we could cover, you know, some gaps with, you know, and we got away with it, you know. Same thing was with this plane that we used. We had actually three Spitfires, real Spitfires in the film. And then we had one Yak that was like a camera Spitfire that we disguised, you know, but we had this plastic Spitfire that we used, and this is, we were shooting it off there for a crash landing that we were shooting. And then I had to also use it in another scene a couple of days later, and it was in a pretty bad shape after that crash scene. And it was actually funny because Chris asked us to make a camera, like a compartment out on the plane, you know. So we put a plastic barrel on the plane, and we put the IMAX camera in there, and then they shut it off, you know, and the plane sank with the camera. And the water there, the beauty of shooting there, you know, in that Izmir, which is huge, you know, is that the water is not salt, it's fresh water, you know, and that makes all the difference with equipment and people, and there's no tide, you know, it's always the same level. So that made it much easier to shoot there, you know. This is the guy who painted the backdrops as well, but he was also fixing the plane, you know. So, so this is when we were fixing the plane after the crash, you know, and then we needed to use it for another purpose, you know. We put it on a scissor lift to use it as the plane sinking slowly with the actor in it, in the water there, you know. So it's on like 2 scissor lifts, you know, and could go up and down. And this is after the test, you know, and we had to film this the day after, and we didn't have a set, you know, so I had to call in the production and tell them that we didn't have a set, and they picked me up to see Chris because they didn't dare to tell him, so I had to tell him myself, you know, that we didn't have a set. And they had to change the schedule and do the sinking hospital ship next, you know, with the burning sea, you know, with about 200 extras, 200 stuntmen in the water. But it's what happens, you know, and no one was upset. So we just moved ahead, you know, and we fixed the plane in a couple of days. This is while we were fixing the plane, you know, the special effects were helping us out. And we got it intact and much stronger. You can see the frame under the wings there, you know, so it would work for us, you know. This is shooting it in the water, actually with a stuntman, you know, but we had the actor there as well for closer shots. We shot some sections of this scene in the studio at Universal as well, in the tank. So this was another plane that was used in LA, mainly on the last 10 days of shooting. You know, there were 10 days. There were about 40 days, you know, in France and Holland, and we had 10 days. I think it was, yeah, about 5 or 10 days in LA, you know, and this was a plane that was placed close to the ocean, you know, and was kind of a mantronically controlled, you know. And this is then in Swanage in England, where we shot some train sequences. And this is Weymouth, where we shot the homecoming and the exiting of
The call went out.
those
We have
scenes.
to go to Dunkirk. Ready on the stern line.
What are you doing? You know where we're going.
Into war, George.
I'll be useful, sir.
For ours. You saw me. She's about to leave.
They need to send more ships. Every now and then the push comes.
So there you could see, sections from Weymouth, you know, where they're heading out, you know. It was quite a dressing job there, but it wasn't too much that we had to do, you know. And regarding the airplanes in the film, we used, as I said before, you know, we used a Russian Yak plane as a camera ship, you know. So we had 2 seats in the plane that we could keep the actor in the front seat and the camera in the back seat, and controlling the plane as well from the back seat. So we could fly. We could have the IMAX camera on the wing and counterballast on the other wing, you know, and that's what we did, and we shot the actor like this. And we could shoot the over-shoulder shots with the actor himself, and we had a scuba camera as well, or scuba lens, you know, like a 90-degree lens, you know, that we could look at the profile of the actor flying the actual plane with the real planes in the background as well. And I believe there is there's a sequence here. Excuse me.
There's no hiding from this, son. We have a job to do.
Turn it around!
We shall fight in pieces. We shall fight on the landing grounds. We shall never surrender. We shall never surrender. We shall never surrender.
Yeah, and the filming was sometimes quite complex. Let's see. The filming in the air and on the sea, because we had to do it simultaneously, or that was his choice, you know. So sometimes we had a few like scaled airplanes. We had little Stukas that they were only about this size, you know, that we had on the beach, you know, that you could shoot from the jetty or from the mole without realizing they were so small, you know, because you had no comparison. And they were like radio controlled, you know, and we used them quite a lot for all the attacks on the beach and all the German attacks, you know. And of course, with the 3 timelines as well, you know, that we have in the film, there are 3 timelines. We did a lot of shooting, you know, from the ship to the air, from the air down to the ships, you know, etc. And in one instance, we had a German bomber, a Heinkel bomber, that was about the size of this stage from here to there, you know, the size of it, and it needed an airfield to take off. So the way we managed with that one, you know, is that we had the guys who controlled the plane. They would take off, you know, and then they would jump on with a camera in a helicopter, and they would control the plane out to the Izmir, flying over the ship. The only CGI there is the dropping of the bomb down. Then the explosion is done in camera at the same time on the ship. So, and we had camera on the ship, camera in the plane, and then we had the 3rd camera ship, which was a Beechcraft plane, you know, with the propellers on the wings, you know, where we could place the IMAX camera in the front at the nose of the plane, and at the back as well, you know. So that was very handy, you know, with all those different possibilities of camera positions on planes with the actor and with planes in the background or the ocean as well. And most of the stuff on this film is done in camera, you know. There's very little CGI, you know. I was actually, when I went to the premiere, I was very shocked, you know, because I saw so many details that I didn't like, you know, but nobody else sees, you know. And I asked the visual effects supervisor, so what happened, you know, what were you doing, you know? So, and he said, I wasn't allowed to do anything, he said, you know. So, of course, it's very expensive to do visual effects when you shoot on 70 and 65 millimeter film, because you have to scan everything, you know, and then comp the shots in that you have to add in, you know, and it's a very expensive procedure, but that is the procedure he chooses to use. I would like to go quickly now. I would like to say enough about Dunkirk and go quickly, if I may, into Interstellar. So I'm just going to play a little sequence here.
Rosencloud.
So this was my second film with them, where I helped them out, working on the glacier and on the water with those two planets and two locations on Interstellar, and it was quite a location job, and I helped them find one of the locations there. Chris knew the glacier from Batman Begins because we used it on that film earlier. And there were some huge challenges there. We had to evacuate and secure our sets for a couple of days because of very strong winds that came in, that were lethal. And but we managed, and all the sets got back to LA. And those are the drawings of the spaceships that we had there, that we had to, we worked in tents, giving them the final texture, and this was one of the constructions we did there was the man's pod, which you saw earlier in the footage. We had to, it was interesting for this construction, we had to, because it's built on the ice, and the ice is melting a lot, especially in that season when he came there, in the summer and in the fall. So you have a lot of rain and stuff, so I think the ice melted 2 meters down while we were building this set there, so we cut down deep into the ice to secure that we would at least, be somewhere in the ice, when we would shoot it. It was a 6 weeks prep for this set. And you see the surface there, because he wanted it kind of dug into the ice, like the ice had crawled over it and taken over it. So we used this wax surface to meet the ice, So we waxed the surface and then we painted it with some oil paint, But you can see the seam there, We always had problems with the seam, and it's in the film, but nobody sees it, We used some loose ice to hide it, So this is you see, we cut with chainsaws into the ice, to make the foundation for the set. This is a little miniature. This is Nathan, the designer. They're shooting a little miniature on the ice, But it was funny, This was a story I told earlier about, you see how graphic and black the glacier is there. It's all sand. This is when he asked me to make the glacier white, He said, I'm taking the camera up there, and I'll be shooting in 15 minutes with the cast, you make the ice white, So, but it looks graphic, and it looks beautiful in the film, when it's so graphic, It's something otherworldly about it. And there was a big challenge to move all the sets up to the glacier from the water world where we shot earlier. This is the water world, and he and Nathan, they had scouted on their own before, and looking for a good place for this, and they couldn't find it, so they called me and they asked me to reroute a river and dig this huge area and make a pond, a huge pond, And I said to them, give me like a week or 10 days, I'll find the place for you, I said, And I called this guy I know who's like a driftwood wrangler and, a nature child, and he said to me immediately, I know the place, and we went for a week's trip, and we brought up like 5 different places that were a possibility, but this was the best one, which was a place with 180 degrees of horizon, and fitted perfectly for this scene, and he knew the place because there was a trawler that stranded some years before, just beyond that reef there that you see in the background. And so they made a underwater, there's a compressed sand under the water, and you can drive on it. You know, as you can see, it's my old Land Rover there. You know, these were the chunks of plastic we got to Iceland, and we made the final texture in tents in Iceland for the spaceships. You know, and we had a huge issue with the landing gear as well, as you saw there in the beginning with the lag landing. You know, that was we had to build up the ice to let the lag meet the ice. You know, because it was too short, the leg. You know, it didn't reach under. This is the location. You can see it, and we had to have cranes and different machinery there. You know. And the beauty of Tars and Case in the film, the robots, you know, is wherever we were shooting, you know, we would bring the components of the robots, you know, for the visual effects, also to get the texture, and for the actors, of course, for the performance. And there's always the guy who plays the robots, Bill. He was always there with them, moving them, and then the special effects were moving them as well, you know. But you would get the texture and the light on the surfaces of the robots, and which helps enormously for the visual effects, you know. So, and they got the Oscar for this film, you know, the visual effects and the special effects, especially for I think because of the robots, you know. Okay. So, shall we have some questions? And
as you wish.
Yeah, what do you want? You know, do you want to ask questions and I can answer something, or?
There is one question already. Sabine.
Hi, very, very exciting. Thank you very much. I have a question. We all know that Nolan doesn't like CGI so much. He really wants to do things practical, physical, effects-wise, which was super fascinating to see this with the cutout soldiers, almost like Hitchcock's Ravens in the birds. You know, I was really amazed to see you would still do that in the day of CGI. Is it really that much cheaper, and is it also that much better looking? So yeah.
I think, as you said yourself yesterday in your speech, you know, it's the analog method, you know, where you have the components, you know, there, you know, even though it's imperfect, you know, and you get the light and you get the shadows, you know, you get the action on the surfaces. It makes it so much easier, and it makes it so much more real for the VFX to, you know, and he likes to say, you know, I know he usually pushes the VFX to the side, you know, stay back, you know, and but he needs them, you know, and but he likes to use the analog method, like you talked about, and enhance the objects at hand, you know, and then comp, as we say, to use composite method to comp the actual stuff that you get into the shot, you know, into the frame, you know. And but he tries to avoid that. It's also because of economical reasons, you know, that he tries to avoid. Usually, when I work with visual effects people, you know, they say, if you can do it, you know, then do it, you know, because if I'm gonna do it, you know, it's gonna be like 100 times more expensive if you can do it, you know. And if you do it not so well, I'll enhance it, you know, I'll fix it, you know. But then they have the elements, you know, and the materials, you know, and that is very important when you're working with visual effects and real sets, you know, and set builds, you know, is to go as far as you can with the build, with the money that you got and the capabilities, you know, whatever people you have, to meet the visual effects somewhere on the way, you know, so they can enhance, you know, and it's so much better for the look of the film. And as in the case with the robots in Interstellar, it's superb, you know, they are just strangely alive, you know.
Thank you. Just two quick practical questions. So these paper cut out, what if it started raining? What would you do with like rain?
They were not paper, they were canvas, you know.
Oh, it's canvas.
They were canvas and wire, you know, just like chicken wire, you know, canvas and a little frame, you know, and then we tented them down and they stood proud, you know, thousands of them, they stood proud on the beach the whole time, and they saved so much money for the production on the jetty there with all the shots towards the beach. They were there, you know, every day, you know. No matter what weather, you know, they were there.
And they didn't need hotels and food.
No feeding, nothing, you know.
And sorry for last practical nerdy question. These that giant beach, you know, construction-wise and everything, how did you do to because you would have to bring things in with trucks, modern trucks, how to not make lots of modern tracks in the sand? Or, you know, we always ask to remove modern tracks if we build on a nature site, and this is just such a huge canvas, how to handle it?
Yeah, that was one of the main things, you know. It was always a happy moment when I looked away from the city towards the sea, you know. But the camera was always running along the beach, you know, and more towards the city than the ocean until we were on the jetty, you know. So we used the different methods, you know. Of course, we built the facade for that huge convention center that was kind of immediately in the way, and we spent quite a lot of money on that. And we got away with that, you know, and we had some kind of metal structure as a second layer there in front, you know, that we found at some cement place, you know, some rusty old thing, you know, that we put up there. And then we used the containers and carpets, sand-colored carpets, you know, to hide like a long bulk of small shops in the background, you know. So we had about 20 containers that we stacked up like diagonally, and we put sand carpets all the way to the top of them. And then we had a lot of sand, so we pushed sand up against them. And with bright surfaces, we used those Icelandic nets, you know, that we could throw over those surfaces and they would disappear. It's like a gradient filter for the surroundings. We also tried to use that. There was this big hanging bridge that we had there in the background, you know, a modern hanging bridge, you know, that we wanted a permission to put up the nets and then put smoke coming from those nets, you know, and there were some scenes that we had looked at from a very old film called The Red Desert. That is, you know, there's quite a lot of brutalist industrial buildings in that film, you know, with a lot of smoke coming from them, you know, and we were trying to imitate that, you know, but they wouldn't allow us to put the nets up there, so we just used the black smoke, you know. The black smoke, we pumped it. It was diesel smoke, you know. We pumped out like, you know, thousands of cubic meters of black smoke there, you know, polluting the air there. But there was a lot of pollution anyways, you know. But it was biodiesel.
At least.
Questions? I'd like to know technically and logistically how you can manage this big set, because you have to be almost everywhere.
No, you can't really be everywhere. Well, my key to dealing with all this, you know, is to take down notes, you know, whatever it is, you know, to photograph and take notes, you know, and then gather all those notes, you know, and it's so important in a process like this to have all the notes from the designer, from the director, you know, everything that you can gather, everything from the surroundings, you know, everything that you hear, you know, and keep it with yourself, and because information can get so easily contaminated, and then everything starts to fall apart, you know. So the important thing is so I would make notes every week for each day of the week ahead, you know. I would make notes for all the departments with visuals, you know, giving the information, and of course when the information and things change, which is the nature of filmmaking, then to announce the changes immediately to you know, everybody had the information, everybody, and you know, it's number one in this kind of business, you know, is to distribute the information and make sure it's not contaminated, you know, it's the right information.
Last, because we have to leave the room, I think your question is that we'll be outside. So, but at last, briefly, I think this is the knocking questions from all of us. Have you ever have a chance to say no to Christopher Nolan?
No, I never say no to anyone, you know. I maybe would say no to a producer if he asks me to do something stupid, you know, but I would never say no to the director, you know.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Eggert Ketilsson.
Thank you.